On our lesson plan for today, we do have the mid-chapter checkpoint, which you can find on page 363 and 364. So we are going to be doing both the mid-chapter and lesson 9.6, which is 365 to 368. So here we have Craig's blank page. The only thing that's going to look a little different today with regards to copyright and this publisher is that you'll have to go to Teams to find this, not Facebook. So I will be directing you to Teams. As far as the mid-chapter checkpoint, it really is just the things that we've covered in chapter 9 thus far. Your vocabulary words are decimal, decimal point, hundred, and hundredth. And I want you to look at those last two as they look really, really similar. And I want you to think about how we've been talking about the number in the hundreds place for the entire year, as well as last year, and probably most of second and first grade. Hundreds is like if I had hundreds of dollars. Hundredths is what we've just recently introduced, and you can find that it is a fraction, like 1/100th would be 1 over 100 as a denominator. So I want you thinking about that information when you go to plug this in over here. And then if you look at number 4, it says to write the fraction or mixed number and the decimal. So it might be like in the case of number 5 where it's going to be a mixed number. In the case of number 4, it's going to just be a fraction. They actually want you to convert number 6 to hundredths. And so Craig, would you please draw a line right next to, like draw a new fraction. You don't know the numerator. No. A new fraction right here. You don't know the numerator. And put hundredths, underneath, okay? And don't. You'd be giving it away if you wrote what the answer is. But this is what we want you to do. We want you to write this number as 100th. So you know what you have to do to the 10 to get to 100. You do the same thing to the 8 to get the numerator for that. But then they also want that one in decimal form. So on that same line, you would, or beside it or whatever, you would write this one that you come up with as a decimal. Craig, I'm not going to have you do that. Okay. This one, you are going to convert to hundredths as well. I don't want you to overthink it. It's in the tenths place right here, and it reads 5/10. So it might be easier to put 5/10 as a fraction and then make it hundredths. 6/10, this goes back to exactly like number 6. 6/10 in this case just becomes hundredths. So he could draw the line and put 100 underneath it again and show us how you would change that. But don't forget, you need to do them in both fraction and decimal form. Number 9, number 10, and number 11 actually want you to write them in fraction or mixed number. No, they want you to write this fraction or mixed number as a money amount and a decimal in terms of $1. And if you'll remember back to our lesson here, we were writing these on page 357 as decimals and dollars. So that's what they would like you to do in this case right here. So write it as a decimal and as a money amount. This one is a mixed number, so it's going to have a dollar amount and then a fraction. And this one is kind of the trickier one because you're really only writing 4 cents. So be careful with that. And then on this side, you just have some story problems that you're going to read through and see if you can try to figure out after the last few days that we have talked through chapter 9. So today's lesson is actually found on page 365. And the first part, we're going to be learning to add fractions when the denominators are 10 or 100. And what you know about adding fractions is that denominator has to be the same. So if you have a denominator of 100 and a denominator of a 10, you're going to have to do some converting to get the denominators the same. So we're going to talk through this problem. Craig's going to do the writing for me on these examples. The 4th grade classes are painting designs on tile squares to make a mural. Mrs. Kirk's class painted 3/10 of the mural. Mr. Becker's class painted 21/100 of the mural. What part of the mural is painted? And as you know, you would go to add, Craig, give me those numbers again real quick.
3/10.
3/10 plus 21/100. The problem is you are not just going to add across here, and get 24/100. This is no bueno. Not what you're going to do. This is not how you're going to do this, okay? So as you know, you have 3/10 and you have 21/100, and you are going to have to make this denominator the same. So how are you going to make, well, only one of them you can change. So Craig, what do you think is the easier one to change?
10.
To what?
100.
Okay, so he would like us to change this to 100. So what does that numerator become then, Craig? 330, because you had to multiply the bottom by 10. You have to do the same thing to the top and multiply the top by 10. So now you have a new problem that is 30/100 plus 21/100. And now you know with the denominator being the same, you should just be able to add across. So Craig, what is 30 plus 21?
51.
51. And your denominator is?
100.
Hundredths. Sorry about my squeezing it in over there. So you get 30/100 plus 21/100 is 51/100. That's written as a fraction. This would be written as a decimal. So we're going to go back over here, Craig, and it's showing us exactly the same thing here. It's telling us that in this case right here, you have to make this 3/10 hundredths, which is fairly easy to do because all you're doing is really adding a 0. So Craig, you're going to be multiplying the 10 and the 3 by the same thing. What do you think they are?
10.
10, good. So put 10 in those blue squares there and then do the actual math. Good. And that's what we got up there. So 30/100 plus 21/100 is 51/100. So 51/100 of the mural is painted. Now it says write 1/10 as 10/100 here. So you'd multiply both of these. Oh, sorry. The question is 4/100 plus 1/10. And you still can't just add that across and get 5/110. So you have to change the tenths to hundredths. And that becomes 10/100. So then you take 10/100.
Wait.
Well, this is already in the hundredths, right?
Yeah.
So this is what you've made, was this 10/100. Now you're going to put what you already knew and add across. So you get 4 plus 10 is 14. So 4/100 plus 10/100 equals 14/100. So if the denominators are not the same, by the way, it's going to be tenths and hundredths that we're talking about. So you're going to have to convert the one that is tenths to hundredths before you can actually add. All right, let's talk about Sean. Sean lives 5/10 of a mile from the store. The store is 25/100 mile from his grandmother's house. Sean's going to walk to the store and then to his grandmother's house. They want to know how far he'll walk in all, which we know in all tells us to add. So, but you can't just add 5/10 and 25/100. You have to do some converting. So think about 5/10 as the fraction 5/10, okay? And think about 25/100 as 25/100. Now it's really looking a lot like the last problem that we did. We've got one that has a tenths and one that has a hundredths. We've got to do some converting here. So 5/10, you're going to actually go ahead and write 5/10. We haven't converted it yet. 5/10 and plus 25/100. Okay, so how are you going to get one of these to match in the denominator? 5/10, you're going to do what? Multiply both top and bottom by 10 to get 50/100. So 5/10 plus 25/100 is actually going to be 50/100 plus 25/100. And that's exactly what they've written here. So you're on track, becomes 75/100. So the sum as a decimal, 75/100. How do you write this as a decimal? 0.75. Good. So Sean will walk 0.75. Now, this one's a little bit easier. It's not giving it in a story problem, it's money amounts, but you've got 25/100 or 25 cents plus 40/100. Would you write those as a fraction for me first, though, before you just pencil in the answer? 25/100 plus 40/100. Put the plus sign in there. There you go. And that's all you're thinking about when you have it as a decimal like that. And you end up with 65/100, okay? And then just, that's as a fraction. Very good. Could you change that next to it? Could you write it as a decimal? You don't have to erase it. You can just write it next to it. Or if you want, you can erase it. Okay, you get a dollar sign. Gotta have the dollar sign though.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Okay, and in this case, you could take the decimals and line them up. Lining them up would be better. Okay, and then add down. 5 plus 0 is 5. 2 plus 4 is 6. Decimal stays. 0 plus 0 is 0. And obviously that's a money amount, so we put that dollar sign in there. So you get 65/100 or 65 cents. Okay, let's quickly go over here, and then we're going to have you work on your own. So 7/10 plus 5/100. Write the add-ins as fractions with a common denominator. What are you going to make this one, Craig?
It's 70 or 100.
Yeah. So what are you going to make this whole fraction if you're going to change it to hundreds?
70 100.
Good, right there. 70/100. Do you have to do anything to this one?
No.
Nope, it's already in the hundreds. So now you have 75/100. Good. So the sum here, what are you going to do?
Multiply it by 10.
Okay, 1/10 then becomes
10/100.
good. And I would just try to write that near here so that you know that's in place of that. Instead of, yeah, just 10/100. And then add across. 10 plus 11. And the denominator stays
The same.
100. Good. Okay, 36/100 plus 5/10. Craig, just show me what you're going to do there. Good, so now you have 36 plus
50.
50. Good, is
86.
86 over
100.
good. Okay, now this looks a little bit different, but it's really just hundredths and hundredths, isn't it? So how are you going to do that one, do you think? I know in your head, right? Okay, show me the work though.
45.
Good. Now, how are you going to write that as a dollar amount? Okay. And that's just what would go on that line then. Dollar sign's already there. Good. 61. Okay. How about here?
You have to multiply by 10.
Well, you don't have to multiply by 10 though, because it doesn't say 0.8.
Oh, yeah.
It's already in the hundreds, isn't it? So what are you going to add off to the side there for me? Plus, times, not times, plus. Very good. 8, good. 8 plus 8. Carry, good. 8 plus 1. Okay, how are you going to write that as a 0 point? Good. All right. So looking at the on your own, it's similar. You do have different denominators here, so you're going to have to change one of these. Craig, which one do you think they're going to change?
The 10.
The tenths to hundredths.
Mhm.
Okay. And over here, they're going to change
10 to 100.
10 to 100. Good, but you have to change that numerator as well. So go ahead and try 6 through 13 on 367. And then these story problems are always really good for you. If you can figure those out, that would be really good. And then there is a 9.6 in your skinny. Okay. I am going to just quickly video the answers for these on your owns, because I am not sure how to upload a picture into Teams. So it might just be easier, then you'd be able to maybe pause your video. Of course, try these first yourself, because it wouldn't do you any good to just copy the right answers. And then here's the mid-chapter. And then for anybody was looking for yesterday's, there's the on your own from yesterday and the practice. All right. Happy math.